The morning started like any other, with me, Adam, scrolling through emails on the couch, sipping coffee while Sarah, my wife of 12 years, bustled around the kitchen. The smell of freshly brewed espresso mingled with the faint sound of her humming as she packed our daughter Emma's lunch. It was our little routine, peaceful, predictable, and, until that moment, safe. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't mean to look. Normally, I wouldn't have cared. But something made me glance over, just for a second. A name popped up on the screen, Jim. My brow furrowed. I didn't recall her ever mentioning a Jake. Sure, Sarah had taken up a sudden interest in fitness over the past 6 months, Pilates, strength training, all with her shiny new personal trainer, but Jake. The name was unfamiliar. Probably just a gym buddy, I told myself, even as a slight unease crept into my chest. I tried to turn my attention back to the email on my laptop, something about the quarterly sales report, but then another message came in. Can't stop thinking about last night. You were amazing. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. My stomach tightened as the words burned themselves into my mind. You were amazing. There wasn't a scenario in the world where that phrase was innocent. My chest felt heavy, like someone had piled bricks on top of me. Jake wasn't just a trainer. I stared at the phone, willing the screen to turn off, to erase the proof of what I had just seen. But there it was, glowing innocently on the counter, as if mocking me. I glanced toward the kitchen. Sarah was still humming, slicing strawberries, completely oblivious to the wrecking ball she'd just swung at our lives. My mind raced. Sarah's late-night workouts. Her renewed interest in her appearance, tight leggings, new sports bras, hours at the gym. I'd told myself it was a healthy hobby, that I should be proud of her for taking care of herself. But now, every moment I'd brushed off as innocent felt tainted. The gym memberships, the hours spent away, it all suddenly fit a very different picture. My heart pounded in my ears. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, not without proof, but denial only works for so long when the evidence stares you in the face. The air in the room felt thicker, harder to breathe. Everything okay? Sarah's voice pulled me back to the moment. She stepped into the living room, holding 2 cups of coffee, her expression calm, warm. Perfect, like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back. For a moment, I faltered. I felt the grin on my face before I even realized I was smiling. My body, it seemed, had decided on autopilot, act normal, don't tip her off. Yeah, I said, my voice even. Just work stuff. She handed me a cup and plopped down beside me, her knee brushing against mine. Her touch, once so comforting, now felt foreign, almost repellent. She leaned over to peek at my laptop screen, her hair brushing against my arm, and I had to stop myself from flinching. What are you working on? She asked casually, sipping her coffee. Just emails. The words came out more clipped than I'd intended. I added a forced smile to soften the edge. Trying to get ahead of next week. She nodded, satisfied, and turned her attention to the morning news on TV. As she settled in, her phone buzzed again. This time, she grabbed it quickly, a small smile flickering across her lips as she typed something back. I watched her from the corner of my eye, my blood running cold. That smile wasn't for me. I stared down at my coffee, the steam curling lazily upward, but I couldn't take another sip. My appetite was gone. I needed answers, but not here, not now. I needed to play this carefully. If Sarah thought she could hide something this big, she had another thing coming. My world had shifted, and she had no idea. Over the next week, I became an actor in a play I never auditioned for. I wore the mask of the oblivious husband while every fiber of my being screamed for answers. The image of that text haunted me, replaying over and over like a broken record. You were amazing. I couldn't confront her, not yet. If I did, she'd deny it, twist the truth, and I'd be left doubting what I knew in my gut was real. I needed proof. I started coming home earlier than usual, dropping by at odd hours, hoping to catch her off guard. Each time, she'd greet me with a surprised smile, her tone cheerful but just a bit too forced. "You're home early," she'd exclaim, her voice light but carrying an edge of nervousness. I began to notice things I'd overlooked before. She'd fumble with her phone, locking the screen the moment I entered the room. When I asked about her day, her answers felt rehearsed, too tidy. Her laugh, once genuine and warm, now sounded hollow, as if she were trying to cover something up. And her eyes, those were the hardest to ignore. They didn't meet mine the way they used to. Guilt swam in their depths, no matter how much she tried to hide it. Thursday brought the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I was in the hallway, pretending to look for my jacket, when I heard Sarah on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but the words were crystal clear. "Jake, Friday night works. Same place." The blood drained from my face. My stomach knotted. Friday night. Tomorrow. The timing couldn't be better, or worse, depending on how you looked at it. I knew I had to act. My hands clenched into fists as I resisted the urge to storm into the kitchen and demand answers right then and there. No, I needed more than a heated confrontation. I needed undeniable proof. That night, as Sarah went through her usual routine, dinner, a TV show, and scrolling through her phone, I sat across from her, playing my part. We chatted about mundane things, grocery lists, Emma's school projects, her plans for the weekend. All the while, I kept my tone casual, as if I hadn't overheard the damning conversation just hours earlier. Inside, I was anything but calm. My heart thudded relentlessly, my mind racing with plans. It wasn't enough to confirm her betrayal, I wanted to know everything, the depth of it, the details she thought she could hide. I wanted her lies laid bare. Friday evening, I set my plan into motion. After dinner, I leaned against the kitchen counter and sighed. "I hate to do this," I began, feigning annoyance, "but I've got a last-minute meeting tonight. The team's scrambling to fix a client issue." Sarah glanced up from her phone, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Oh, really? That's too bad." She tried to sound sympathetic, but I caught the faint note of relief in her tone. Her shoulders relaxed ever so slightly. She wasn't upset about the disruption to our evening, she was glad. I kissed her on the cheek as I grabbed my keys. "Don't wait up," I said, forcing a grin. My heart hammered as I walked out the door, but she didn't follow me or press for details. She just nodded, distractedly scrolling through her phone. Once outside, I got into my car and drove a few blocks away before parking. My hands trembled as I opened the GPS tracker app on my phone. I'd installed it on her car weeks ago, back when my suspicions first started to take root. Now, it was time to see where she'd go. Sure enough, just 15 minutes later, the tracker blipped to life. Her car left the driveway and headed toward the highway. I waited a few minutes before following at a safe distance, keeping my headlights dim. My grip on the steering wheel was tight, my knuckles white. Every mile felt like an eternity as I trailed her into unfamiliar territory. Finally, the tracker stopped. I slowed as I approached the destination, a small, upscale boutique hotel nestled in a quiet part of town. My stomach churned as I parked a few spots away, keeping my car hidden among others. From the safety of my seat, I watched her car. A few minutes later, she stepped out, wearing a sleek black dress I hadn't seen before, her hair perfectly styled. She looked stunning, radiant even, but not for me. The thought was a punch to the gut. A tall man emerged from another car a few spots down. He wore a fitted blazer and dark jeans, the kind of casual sophistication that screamed confidence. Even without an introduction, I knew it was Jake. My suspicions were now undeniable. They greeted each other with a hug that lingered just a second too long. Their smiles, intimate and knowing, were like a slap in the face. I watched as they walked toward the hotel entrance, her arm brushing against his. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might snap. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything, storm in, confront them, demand answers. But something held me back. Not yet. The weight of what I just witnessed pressed down on me like a lead blanket. Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my child, was meeting another man in a hotel. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was real. My chest burned with anger and betrayal, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I acted now, I'd only give her a chance to twist the narrative, to lie her way out. I needed to play this smart. So, I stayed in the car, watching as they disappeared into the hotel lobby. The neon sign above the door flickered faintly, its glow casting eerie shadows on the parking lot. For now, I let them have their moment. But in my mind, I was already planning my next move. This wasn't over. I spent the night in a storm of anger and resolve. The image of Sarah and Jake, walking into that hotel like nothing in the world could touch them, burned in my mind. If she thought she could shatter my life without consequence, she was about to learn otherwise. I wasn't going to just confront her, I was going to dismantle the web of lies she thought she had so cleverly spun. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through the blinds, my plan was set. It wasn't just about exposing her, it was about ensuring there was no escape, no way for her to twist the narrative. She'd built this house of cards, and I would make sure it came crashing down. Saturday morning, the house was quiet. Emma had spent the night at a friend's, leaving just Sarah and me. I found her in the kitchen, humming softly as she poured herself a cup of coffee. For a moment, I hesitated. The scene was so ordinary, so familiar, that I almost let it lull me back into denial. But the weight of my phone in my pocket, filled with screenshots, GPS logs, and photos, grounded me. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. "Who's Jake?" I asked, my voice calm as I stepped into the room. She froze, her hand hovering over the sugar bowl. Slowly, she turned to face me, her expression guarded. "Jake?" she repeated, feigning confusion. "I don't know what you mean." I pulled her phone from my pocket, unlocking it with ease. I'd memorized her passcode weeks ago. The latest text thread with Jake was already open. I held it up for her to see. "You sure about that?" Her face drained of color, and for a brief moment, I saw the panic flicker in her eyes. But Sarah was quick, I'd give her that. She scoffed, crossing her arms defensively. "You went through my phone. That's private, Adam. You had no right." "Private?" I cut her off, my voice steady but laced with steel. "You mean like your workouts with Jake? The ones in hotel rooms?" Her bravado faltered. "I don't know what you think you saw, but—" "Don't," I interrupted, my tone sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't insult my intelligence with another lie." Her mouth opened, then closed again, as if the words had abandoned her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not this time. I laid the phone on the counter, then pulled out the other pieces of evidence I'd gathered, screenshots of their messages, GPS logs from the tracker on her car, and the photos I'd taken of her and Jake at the hotel. I spread them out like cards on a poker table, each one a trump card she couldn't beat. "Anything you'd like to add?" I asked, folding my arms. She stared at the evidence, her face crumbling. "Adam, her voice broke, and the tears spilled over. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Save it," I said coldly. "This isn't about feelings. It's about betrayal. You didn't just cheat on me, you lied to me, disrespected me, and jeopardized everything we built together. Don't stand there and tell me it didn't mean anything." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know what I was thinking." It was stupid, reckless. Yeah, I said, cutting her off again. It was. And now you get to live with the consequences. I walked out before she could say anything else. Her apologies, her excuses, they were just noise at this point. I wasn't interested in hearing how she'd justify throwing away 12 years of marriage for some guy at the gym. That afternoon, I decided to take the next step. If Sarah thought she could humiliate me in secret, I'd make sure her actions saw the light of day, starting with Jake. I drove to his gym, a sleek, modern building with tinted windows and a line of expensive cars parked out front. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sweat and cologne, and the rhythmic clanging of weights filled the space. I approached the front desk and signed up for a session with Jake. He didn't recognize me, of course. Why would he? To him, I was just another client, someone looking to get in shape. He greeted me with a wide, confident smile, his handshake firm. So, Adam, what are your fitness goals? He asked, clipboard in hand. Oh, I replied, forcing a smile of my own. Strength, endurance, maybe learning how to handle betrayal. He frowned slightly, but he didn't press further. For the next hour, I let him guide me through a workout, nodding along as he spouted tips and encouragement. I played the part of the eager student, all the while watching him, noting his easy arrogance, the way he strutted around the gym like he owned the place. Afterward, as he wiped down the equipment, I approached him in the parking lot. Jake, I said, my tone casual. He turned, flashing that same confident grin. What's up? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. We need to talk about Sarah. The grin faltered. I'm sorry, who? Sarah, I repeated, my smile cold. My wife. His face paled. He took a step back, his cocky demeanor evaporating in an instant. Look, man, I didn't know. Don't, I said, cutting him off. Don't play dumb. You knew exactly what you were doing. You're not as clever as you think. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to stay far away from her. No more texts, no more late-night meetups, no more anything. If I so much as see your name pop up on her phone again, I'll make sure everyone knows who you are and what you've been doing. He nodded quickly, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. Understood. Good, I said, turning to leave. Oh, and Jake? He froze. Yeah. I glanced over my shoulder, my voice icy. You're not just messing with my marriage. You're messing with my life. Don't make me remind you of that. The days following my confrontation with Sarah were a blur of apologies and promises, none of which I cared to hear. She begged, pleaded, swore it had been a mistake, that she'd never see Jake again. Adam, please, she sobbed one night as I sat silently on the edge of our bed. It was a lapse in judgment. I don't want to lose you or Emma. I didn't respond. Her words felt hollow, like an actor reading from a bad script. The trust we built over 12 years had been shattered, and no amount of tears or promises could rebuild it. While she cried, I was focused on something else entirely, how to make sure she understood the depth of her betrayal. Forgiveness wasn't on the table. Revenge, however, was. By midweek, I had my plan in place. Our anniversary was coming up, a milestone Sarah had ironically brought up the week before, talking about how we should do something special. The idea had seemed ridiculous at the time, but now it had a new purpose. I sent out invitations to our closest friends and family, framing the dinner as a celebration of our marriage. Sarah, eager to save face and likely hoping to use the evening as a show of reconciliation, agreed without hesitation. It's a wonderful idea, she said, her eyes red and puffy from days of crying. We need this. I nodded, hiding the satisfaction bubbling beneath my calm exterior. Yeah, I said softly, we do. When the night of the dinner arrived, Sarah went all out. She spent hours getting ready, slipping into a sleek dress that once might have taken my breath away. Now, it only reminded me of the woman who had lied to my face and met her lover in secret. She seemed determined to present the image of a devoted wife, but I knew the truth, and soon, so would everyone else. The restaurant was one of her favorites, elegant, intimate, the kind of place where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries in the past. Our guests arrived one by one, filling the private dining room with laughter and chatter. Sarah played the role of the gracious hostess perfectly, smiling and hugging everyone, her laughter a little too bright, her gestures a little too eager. She was trying to keep up appearances, but I could see the tension beneath her polished facade. I bided my time, waiting until the main course was served and everyone was relaxed. When the conversation lulled, I stood, raising my glass. "I'd like to say a few words," I began, my voice steady. The room quieted, and all eyes turned to me. Sarah smiled nervously, clearly unsure of what I was about to say. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate transparency," I said, locking eyes with her. Her smile faltered. "This year has been challenging, to say the least. But it's also been enlightening. Sarah and I have learned a lot about honesty, haven't we?" Her cheeks flushed as she squirmed in her chair. "Adam," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. I held up a hand to stop her. "No, Sarah, let me finish. Honesty is the foundation of any relationship. And tonight, I think it's only fair that we talk about Sarah's new workout buddy. Jake, isn't it?" The room fell into a stunned silence. Sarah's face went pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Adam, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Not here. Let's talk about this later." "No," I said firmly. "We'll talk about it now. Everyone here deserves to know how you've been spending your time. Go ahead, Sarah. Tell them about Jake." She stammered, her carefully constructed image of the perfect wife unraveling before everyone's eyes. "It's not what you think," she said weakly. "He's just a friend." "A friend?" I laughed bitterly, pulling out the folder I'd brought with me. "I don't think friends meet in hotel rooms, Sarah. I don't think friends send texts like these." I opened the folder and began passing it around the table, screenshots of her messages with Jake, photos of them at the hotel, and GPS logs of her car. The whispers started almost immediately, spreading like wildfire. Gasps of disbelief, muttered exclamations, it was everything I'd anticipated. Sarah's face crumpled as she buried her head in her hands, unable to face the room. Her perfect facade had shattered, and there was no putting it back together. When the folder had made its way around the table, I turned back to Sarah. My voice was calm, but every word hit like a hammer. "I filed for divorce," I said. "The house, custody, everything we built together, you just threw it all away." Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at me. "Adam, please," she choked out. "Don't do this. Not like this." "This isn't about you anymore, Sarah," I replied. "It's about the truth. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I placed my glass on the table and walked out of the room, leaving her to face the stunned stares and whispered judgments of the people she'd been so desperate to impress. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief. The weight of her betrayal was still there, but the burden of carrying it alone was gone. The fallout was swift and merciless. The carefully constructed life Sarah had clung to, the one she'd prioritized over honesty and loyalty, crumbled faster than even I had anticipated. By the time the dinner fiasco became old news, her world was unrecognizable. Jake was the first casualty. A few days after the dinner, his gym started bleeding clients. The anonymous tip I'd sent to the local news outlet, detailing his extracurricular activities with married clients, had done its job. The exposé didn't name Sarah outright, but it didn't need to, the damage was enough. Members canceled their memberships in droves, and Jake's reputation as the charming personal trainer transformed into a cautionary tale. Within weeks, he shut down the gym and left town. I heard he moved back in with his parents. Fitting for a man who'd acted like a reckless teenager. Sarah didn't fare much better. With Jake gone, she turned to the people she thought were her support system. But the friends she'd once bragged to, the ones she'd flaunted her perfect life in front of, weren't as forgiving. The details of her affair spread like wildfire after the dinner. By the time she realized just how far-reaching the consequences would be, her social circle had shrunk to nearly nothing. She moved in with her sister, Lisa, who lived 2 towns over. To Lisa's credit, she tried to defend Sarah at first, calling me to talk things out. But even she couldn't ignore the evidence. Eventually, our conversations shifted to logistics, coordinating Emma's school schedule, holidays, and the occasional handoff when Sarah wanted to see her. Lisa's voice always carried a hint of pity, like she was trying to reconcile the sister she knew with the woman Sarah had become. As for me, I focused on rebuilding. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The house was quiet but not empty. Emma, though confused at first, quickly adapted to the new normal. Kids are resilient that way. I threw myself into being the best father I could be, filling the void Sarah left behind. Family game nights, weekend hikes, baking disastrous cookies, we found a rhythm that felt whole, even without her. My professional life thrived too. Without the emotional drain of Sarah's betrayal weighing me down, I poured myself into work. I landed a promotion, one that required a few late nights and more responsibility but brought a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, my future felt like my own, not something dictated by Sarah's expectations or manipulations. Still, the silence after everything settled was deafening. I didn't miss Sarah, not the version of her who had lied and cheated, but I missed the life I thought we had. There were nights when I'd sit in the living room, Emma asleep upstairs, and wonder how things had gone so wrong. How had the woman I'd built a life with become a stranger capable of so much deceit? Looking back, my actions felt justified. I didn't regret exposing her at the dinner, she deserved to face the truth in front of the people she'd fooled. But as the weeks turned into months, I couldn't help wondering if I'd gone too far. Public humiliation isn't something you can take back, and part of me wondered if I should have handled it differently. But then I'd think about Emma. About the example I was setting for her. I'd spent years showing her that integrity mattered, that trust and respect were the foundation of any relationship. Staying silent, brushing Sarah's betrayal under the rug, would have undermined all of that. What lesson would I have taught her if I'd let her mother get away with it unscathed? That lies don't have consequences. That betrayal is something you tolerate. No, that wasn't the legacy I wanted to leave her. Even so, the line between justice and vengeance blurred more than I'd like to admit. My decision to expose Sarah wasn't just about accountability, it was about making sure she felt the sting of her choices. Part of me relished watching her world unravel. Part of me wanted her to feel the weight of the hurt she'd inflicted. Was that justice? Or was it cruelty disguised as righteousness? In the end, Sarah and I divorced quietly, without much drama. The evidence I'd gathered made the proceedings smooth, she didn't have the leverage to fight for much. I kept the house and primary custody of Emma. She got some savings and a few pieces of furniture, enough to start over but not enough to continue living the life she'd grown accustomed to. We exchanged only the necessary words during the process, our conversations devoid of the warmth and familiarity we once shared. The final time I saw her was in the courthouse, her face pale and drawn, her eyes avoiding mine. It wasn't triumph I felt as we signed the papers. It was emptiness. Months later, I ran into Lisa at the grocery store. She mentioned that Sarah was working part-time at a boutique and living in a small apartment nearby. She's trying, Lisa said, her voice tinged with both sadness and resignation. But she's not the same. Neither was I. The experience had left scars, ones I was still learning to live with. I'd built a new life, one filled with love and laughter, but trust was something I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to give fully again. Now, I can't help but wonder, did I handle it the right way? Did Sarah get exactly what she deserved? Or did I cross a line in making her face the consequences so publicly? What would you have done? Would you have gone through with the public exposure, or chosen a quieter path?